Dalton, Riley, Wolves and Wagers back after the holiday break. We're going to jump right into our updated East and West rankings. Ryan and I actually came to an agreement on these rankings, and we'll dive right into the East.
Yeah, starting in the East, I'll knock off 15, 14, and 13 right away here. Got the Pistons at 15. They've lost 17 in a row. Not much to say about them. Wizards at 14. Not a lot going on out there. And I do have the Hornets, or we have the Hornets at 13. Just not great with LaMelo Ball being out. Not a ton of great basketball over there, but that was expected for those teams. And then even at 12, the Chicago Bulls. Shout out to Kobe White. Very nice game last night. I think he had 31 points, like 10 assists or something like that. But at the end of the day, they just need to blow it up. Zach LaVine, his name continues to be in the trade talks more and more. I swear I see that stuff every single day. DeRozan should probably be out the door as well, and even Vucevic. So they got to blow it up, but right now they're slotted at 12 for us.
Yeah, that's a lot of former all-star talent, but when you kind of look at it, number 11, I think Scotty Barnes could be a borderline all-star. When we talk about that, maybe another episode, but we got them at 11. They're in a really weird spot. They got talent, but it's all kind of like the same wing position.
Right.
It gets clunky, it gets messy. And then we lead into number 10, I think no doubt an all-star. And after dropping 42 and 26 there early on, Bridges. And we got them at number 10 because it's pretty much the Bridges show. And I think if you look at these top 9 teams in front, you kind of look at that star power, and I'll kick it over to you, Rye, for number 9.
Yeah, that's why we have the Hawks there, even though they're actually behind the Nets in the standings. But like you said, the star power plays. I'm more trusting of Trae Young and DeJounte Murray than just a Mikal Bridges-led team. So we're going to put the Hawks at 9.
Yeah, looking at number 8, we've kind of said it all year. The Cavs got talent, but we can't seem to put them in front of the 8 spot. So we're going to keep them there. And I know number 7 has a special place in your heart.
Yeah, I like the Indiana Pacers. I've been high on them for a while, mostly just because of Tyrese Halliburton. I know me and you talked a ton when that trade first happened, but they're just an outlier. They really are. It's tough to really analyze them because they give up so many points. Now, I get the offense is there, but it's hard to have them any higher than number 7 when they're giving up almost 130 points a game. I just can't put them any higher than that.
Yeah, and I almost can't have them any lower than 7. I think we'll stop and talk about the Pacers a little bit because Halliburton is that guy. And when you look in the East, I mean, how can you really put the Pacers behind the Hawks, behind the Nets, behind the Raptors? You just can't when you have a guy that high in the MVP ladder, which I know I had him a little higher than you did, probably an updated one. You'll kind of refresh and put him where he needs to be. But when we kind of lean into the Pacers, they're right at that number 7 spot. Can't really put them much higher, but I don't think you can put them lower, though, either with how they're kind of playing. But then you look at number 6. I think this is the lowest that you can have, the Miami Heat. And this is a lot based off of Jimmy doesn't play a lot in the regular season. We've talked about this, Ryan. We'll talk about another team that kind of affects in our rankings. But we got Miami at number 6, and then you can start with the first team in our top 5, Ryan.
Yeah, and just to touch on Miami briefly, they're a tough team to analyze because like we've talked about over the phone, over text and whatnot, that's just exactly what it is. Jimmy doesn't care about awards. I don't think he'll be an all-star again this season. Bam will probably get Miami's all-star bid, but that's just the way it is. Come playoff time, there's not a lot of better teams out there, but for right now, through the power rankings, got to stick them at 6, but like you said, you can't drop them any lower than that. To start our top 5, we're gonna go with the New York Knicks. They're playing some really good ball. Jalen Brunson, I mean, there's not a lot of other point guards out there that I'd take over him right now. Just a bulldog. Julius Randle has really picked it up recently. I've been impressed with what he's done. His efficiency has skyrocketed after his horrid start. RJ Barrett still having a career year. Mitchell Robinson, one of the best defensive centers in the league. A lot of good things going out there for a Tibbs-led team that loves to play defense. And then at number 4, now I know they just lost to the Nets in a game I wish they would have won to extend the win streak to 10, but they're Orlando Magic. They're a team that doesn't have a true star. Paulo and Franz are kind of 1A, 1B, however you want to look at it. And then they just have a bunch of role players besides that, but they're playing really sound ball together and their underlying metrics are good. So we're going to stick them at 4 for now.
Yeah, and these two teams are just exciting. And Rye, you had the Magic in our first rankings in the top 5, and I have them in the top 5 as well. And you even have them competing with our number 3 team that we'll touch on here in a little bit. But when you look at the Knicks and Magic, those are the 2 teams that I'm tuning into the most right now. And a lot of that has to do with just young star play. And I think we can talk about the 2 stars out in Orlando being star players. I know Banchero We've kind of bashed him here and there, but those two guys in a normal season, I think would both be all-stars. They might not both be all-stars this season, just with a lot of talent out east. But when we look at the 3 spot, I'm just going to talk about Tyrese Maxey because I think that's why the Sixers are still a top 3 team. Because when you look at Joel Embiid consistently missing second night of a back-to-back, I mean, it's automatic at this point. And Tyrese Maxey can only do so much. But though they're at number 3, but I think they're kind of in a tier closer to Orlando and the Knicks, right? But you can kind of get your point after my number 2, which is Milwaukee. Now, I know we kind of both have them at number 2 with Giannis and with Dame. But Dame, what was that, 0 points there in crunch time? Geez Louise, Dame, you got to get cooking because we have them kind of in that own tier. But I'll leave it over to you for number 1 in our East, and I think it's no doubt, right?
Yeah, I think the best team in the league. I think most people would say it's a consensus. Best team in the league. Boston Celtics are 15-4, tied with the Wolves for the best record. But when you look up and down that roster from a talent standpoint, it's a nonstop plethora of talent, right? When your 4th best player right now is Drew Holiday, like that's a good problem to have. Like last year, I would say Drew Holiday was the Bucks' 2nd best player, and all of a sudden he goes to he's the 4th best player. Like that's just how deep that roster is. Derek White being your number 5 option, however you want to look at it on offense or whatnot. It's just there's too much talent. It's almost unfair. Brad Stevens has built a hell of a team out there, and so they have to be number 1 for us. But we're gonna hop right into the West after this now. 15 undebatably, kind of like the Pistons for us. It's got to be the Spurs. They've lost 14 straight. They beat the Suns twice, and then they just go on this just horrid spell. But that's kind of what was in line. I'm sure they wanted to tank another year, but I kind of wish they would let Wemby go a little more. So maybe we'll see some of that towards the end of the year, but they're kind of a tough watch right now.
Yeah, I think they got to be 15, but I also think the Blazers got to be 14, and they could be in the argument for 15 as well when you just look at overall talent. But then leading into the Grizzlies at number 13, geez Louise, they just can't seem to get out of the spot, right? And we know they got the talent, but I just watched them the other night, and when Desmond Bane doesn't knock down shots, this is a horrible basketball team when they don't have their full squad. But I'll kick it over to you for number 12.
Yeah, it's just gonna be tough for the Grizzlies to make the playoffs. You know, Ja's suspension could be coming up pretty soon, and then he can get back and try and play. But when you're this many games under 500, you know, we're already a quarter of the way through the season in a tough Western Conference. It's uphill sledding. So we'll see what happens out there. But right now we got Jazz at 12. You could flip-flop those teams if you wanted. Lauri Markkanen's been out 4 or 5 games in a row, so not really a lot to talk about there. Team I will touch on a little bit more is the Rockets at 11. I think they've lost 3 straight now. They're under 500 and they're starting to drop. A team I was high on coming into this year just because I like Ime Udoka, and you know he got into it with LeBron last night, which is kind of funny. So we'll see what happens there. That's kind of balancing out to probably where they should be, you know, right in that play-in contention, you know, or lottery team. But their splits are crazy. I don't know if you've seen this, and I was made aware of it last night. 0-8 on the road. They're 7-1 at home and 0-8 on the road.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of funny to me, but they've slipped out of the top 10 for me because I had them pretty high last time, but this is probably where they deserve to be.
Yeah, when you look at the 2 teams in front of the Rockets, I mean, the Clippers and the Warriors, you're just talking about teams that are really not that exciting. They're both playing pretty horrible. I think the dynasty is done in Golden State officially. They might be able to slip into the playoffs this year, but they're not going to compete with the top seeds in the West. So 9 and 10, not very sexy, but we can jump into the top 8, right?
And a team that has been playing better as of late, outside of the Clippers and Warriors, you know, like you said, look bad. Not a ton of firepower out there in Golden State, so we're not even going to touch on them, which is crazy to think. And you know how great that dynasty was. But Falcons have been playing great ball. I got them at 8 right now. I think they could even climb up higher. I really like what they're doing. CJ McCollum, I'm not sure what his timeline looks like, but even without him, they've started to creep up the Western Conference standings. I still think they'll probably be a play-in team. I don't think they'll make a top 6 spot to, you know, have that guaranteed playoff berth, but we'll see. And then at number 7, it's the Sacramento Kings, team that's a lot higher in the actual Western Conference standings. But kind of like the Pacers, they give up a lot of points, so we'll see what happens with them. But in a tough Western Conference, it's really hard to have the Kings any higher than 7.
Yeah, and I keep seeing the Kings at 7, and I can't keep putting them higher. And hopefully I didn't freeze there for your eye. But when you look at number 6, we got the Dallas Mavericks. And yes, a lot of people might think that's a little low, but when you look at the top five, the team right above them just beat them. And that was after a 30-0 run, which,
Crazy.
my goodness, absolutely insane. They can't be lower than 6 with how Luka's playing. His 3-point percentage has dipped below 40%, dipped below 40%. So I'm not super worried if he stays around that 38-39% with everything that he does. But I'll let you talk about number 5 on our list.
Yeah, the OKC Thunder, I think they're a little bit ahead of their timeline, but then again, maybe not. You know, Sam Presti's going to be in a very interesting decision. He's got all this draft capital, all these assets. When do you cash him in? When do you make your move? Coming into the season, I'm thinking he probably thought 1 more year and then we'll make our move. But maybe you do it now. Like, you're playing really, really good basketball. But ultimately, I don't like Chet Holmgren being my second best player. I love him like as a player and everything. You know, he's from Minneapolis, so we got to show love to him. And Shea is more than capable of being a 1A on a winning team, but you got to have somebody else there. So maybe they cash those picks in, like you touched on, beat the Mavs last night. So interesting to see what they'll do, but they're at 5 for us right now.
Yeah, and that just really scares me for the Timberwolves because SGA is probably going to stay in OKC for a really, really long time. And that's going to be tough for Ant. And leading into number 4, OKC, I'm pretty positive they just beat LA by, a 20-piece the other night. So some people might be upset that we have the Lakers at 4. But when you look up and down this roster, I think you have to have them in the top 4 picture right now to have that home playoff series. But I think we really want to talk about the top 3 here. So let's jump right into it. We're going to start with the Phoenix Suns back with Devin Booker. Obviously, KD is still doing his thing. But Bradley Beal, I know we talked a little bit about, wow, wouldn't Tyus Jones be a great fit out in Phoenix right now? But I do think the way D-Book is, his ability to kind of like play make more than he used to be. Obviously, he's been known as a 3-level scorer, kind of coming into the league as like a Klay Thompson. But I think his playmaking is really taken a notch above. So we do have Phoenix slotted in at number 3.
Yeah, and I love the quote that I saw from Devin Booker last night. He was asked about Kevin Durant, or I can't remember what the question was exactly, but his answer was Kevin Durant's the scorer and I'm the point guard. He's totally embraced that. I mean, he could legitimately average close to 10 assists a game, which is crazy to think about for a guy who's dropped 70 in a game and is more of, that pure score. But he's really expanded into that playmaking role. Maybe part of that's playing with a Ricky Rubio, learning an offense like that, learning how to play on ball as being a creator. So it's really fun what they're doing out there, to see what they're doing with Booker when he can still go get you a bucket anytime he wanted. But that's what they should do, is they should have him defer to Kevin Durant and play making table set for him. So Phoenix Suns, I mean, that's a juggernaut out there, especially once they get Bradley Beal back. But even without him, I think Booker and KD are miles ahead of where Beal is now. But that just shows you that you're missing a guy like Bradley Beal who's averaged 30 in a season and it's not even really affecting you. That just shows how good your team is, and they got really good role players on cheap deals. So they built a really nice team out there. And then we got the Denver Nuggets at number 2. They've climbed up the Western Conference standings here, even with Jamal Murray being out. Jokic is just that good. MPJ has been playing some really good ball for them to help them climb these standings, but obviously it's Jokic doing the heavy lifting. And come playoff time, there's maybe not a lot of teams you would take over them, including our number 1, being the Wolves. But the reason I have the Wolves there is because they have 15 wins, tied for the best record in the NBA, and they also match up really good against the Denver Nuggets. A lot of people would be surprised that the Wolves have won 15 games to this point, except Denver Nuggets fans, right? They knew this was coming. They watched those playoffs, or that playoff series last year, and they knew it was a lot better than a lot closer than a 4-1 series. And I don't think a lot of people realize that this year. So we will still have the Wolves at 1, and you can touch on them if you want.
Yeah, I think kind of looking at the East and the West, everybody kind of wants to talk about how the West 1 through 5, 1 through 6 can kind of get switched around, which I do agree. But I also kind of want to look at the East for a second too. And, I know Milwaukee's in our second spot, and I kind of jumbled on my words, but you could easily have the Magic and the Knicks possibly above a team like Milwaukee, above a team like Philadelphia, kind of the same way the West is right now. But when you look at how the Wolves are playing and you look at the standings, that has to mean something. And with Anthony Edwards being out and still getting wins, now I get it, against some teams that might not have the best lineups. But that's what Timberwolves teams in the past didn't do. They didn't win those games. So winning 13 games in a month was never a thought in my mind. But I'll kick it over to you then this episode, Ryan.
Yeah, I like how you brought up the Bucks. You know, they are 2 for us in the East, but I am concerned about them. I think they have question marks. Now, come playoff time, maybe that gets resolved. But defense really matters in the playoffs. And that backcourt it's not looking great from the defensive side of things. They're really missing Drew Holiday. And Dame isn't a negative defender, but now he's starting to get there in his older age. And when you have Malik Beasley, that's just not a good enough point of attack defense for your backcourt. And even though you have Brook Lopez and Giannis to cover up for that, it's still concerning. You know, you need to have some perimeter defense, and Chris Middleton's past his prime per se. So, you know, he's not really shutting guys down either. So I am concerned about the Bucks a little bit. But yeah, like you said, the NBA as a whole, just a lot of talent in it right now. It's in a really, really good spot outside of those bottom dweller teams that are kind of tough to watch right now. But besides that, we can't really have any complaints about how this season has gone. About a fourth of the way through, and this is what we're looking at right now. And as always, we appreciate you guys for tuning in.